This talk is sponsored by IPFS and Filecoin. IPFS and the Filecoin Foundation are fully distributed open source organizations that aim to help radically improve the internet and drive breakthroughs in computing, which can help move humanity forward. Learn more at filecoin.io and ipfs.io.
Hello everyone, my name's Kyronne and I'm going to be talking about diversity and accessibility within Web3 and why it's important. I'm excited to be here at Web3Con talking about something that's quite close to my heart. I'm currently building a project called MetaDiverse where we highlight diversity within Web3 and advocate for diversity and inclusion within Web3. Let's go to the next slide. So a short introduction. Web3 is a massive opportunity right now to build an internet using our imagination. We can build new worlds, we can build new tools, we can build new ways of interacting with the blockchain and internet. And an important part of that ideology is, challenging monopolies. As we've seen within Web2, most of the internet is stored on servers by a few companies. And, obviously the Web3 technology in terms of decentralization can challenge that. And building trust, obviously within Web3, we have the opportunity to see where transactions are coming from on the public ledger as it's named. And this allows for us to see how individuals or organizations interact with the blockchain. Decentralization is very important within DAOs at the moment. It's allowing people to gain jobs, to work in a different way. But also in terms of decentralization, people were able to stake, people were able to contribute to networks, people were able to run nodes, which basically is something you wouldn't have seen within traditional finance. People were able to contribute in a totally different way. And a massive thing as well as the encryption technology. In Web2 at the moment, I think we just kind of accept that there will be data leaks, private information will be on the public internet. And what Web3 technology allows us to do is solve some of those challenges in terms of how data is stored and just make things a bit safer for individuals who interact with the technology. So a big question for me is, how do we create this new internet? How do we create this Web3 while encouraging diversity and being accessible to as many people as possible? And I want to put that question to those who are listening as well. So something I want to highlight when I talk about diversity and accessibility is the idea that it's about inclusivity for all. So I just want to define diversity and accessibility first, just to give a simple way of looking at both. But when I say diversity, I'm talking about involving people from a wide range of backgrounds. And when I talk about accessibility, I'm talking about removing barriers for people with different needs. So an important word I want us to think about as well is equity. Essentially, equity is about making sure everyone is treated fairly according to their needs. And I think that's important because when I mention accessibility, removing a barrier might mean putting up a ramp for someone at an event so that people who are on wheelchairs can access that event. That might take more time than, creating something more accessible for someone else. But it's still important to do that, to do something for for that person's particular needs to make sure the event is accessible. So why? Why is this important? Why is accessibility and diversity important within Web3? So if you were looking at it from a purely selfish standpoint, as we age, accessibility becomes more important because we lose the ability to see lower contrast things. Also, our cognitive ability can become more impaired. So by having more accessible design, obviously it helps us as we grow, and also obviously there's many older people that exist within the world as well, and also younger people as well. So clearer design and layout benefits a wide range of people. So clearer design make it easier for someone with issues with executive function, someone with ADHD, for an example, but also for somebody who may be stressed on a particular day or maybe in a rush. These things obviously help a wide range of people, not just those that may have accessibility needs, but just generally help people to have a better experience with your web app or with your application or website. So communities that encourage diversity are happier, which is massive. People feel more included, people feel like they can express themselves more, and just generally people feel more comfortable when they know that people aren't going to be discriminating, or people are just encouraged to be themselves essentially. So a quote I want to touch on by Sonali De Silva is judgment can afford to be lazy. Inclusion is a skill that takes courage, empathy, and practice. The reason this quote is so important to me is because diversity and accessibility are things that we need to be active in doing. It takes courage in the sense that we have to be open to the fact that we may have much to learn in those areas. We also have to be open to the fact that in the past we may not have been, thinking as much about accessible design, and we may not have been creating environments that would have encouraged diversity as much as we may have liked to. Empathy in the sense that we listen to different perspectives, we encourage different perspectives, we welcome them. And practice, of course, the most important thing is putting these ideas into practice, and as I mentioned before, actively, trying to act in a way which encourages accessibility and encourages diversity. So we're early right now. What are the costs of being early? So with this technology, sometimes we can like that we're early because maybe we're more tech focused, but this can be challenging for new users. So or for users who have accessibility needs and so forth. So I've seen before just a plain white page with minimal text, something that you probably would have seen in the 1990s, and just like a button that you interact with. Obviously, for somebody who might be more tech aware, they're willing to take that risk. But for new users or people with accessibility needs, they may look at that and that might scream scam. So on the opposite end of the spectrum, you might have a website or application that uses a lot of complicated jargon, is doesn't really break things down simply. So obviously for users, new users, this can be very challenging. It can be off-putting, and I think it's important we think about how we can explain things in an easier to read way or a simpler way, just to make what we're doing more accessible. And lastly, just communities discouraging to newbies, telling people to find information themselves, expressing that complicated ideas behind Web3 are very easy to understand, or just being generally rude or discouraging to questions. I mean, one community I saw, they were just being very negative towards community members and explaining their own thoughts were very easy to understand. Now, I know somebody who's been investing in crypto for 4 to 5 years. They invested in own thoughts themselves, but they don't fully understand how the technology works. So it's quite almost patronizing to say to a new member of the community, or quite rude, should I say to a new member of the community that that this is very easy to understand when it's very difficult for people to understand. Okay, so what can we do when it comes to accessibility? So I think the most important thing is using elements that contrast well. So this just opens up your website to a large group of people who may have issues with sight, who may be a bit older. I think it's very important to think about that when we're designing within Web3. Also, responsive websites where all elements work. When the website is made bigger, this is massive. Someone wants to zoom in and the website isn't working properly. Obviously, that can be a barrier to them. So making sure that the website still works regardless of the sizing of it. Alternative text for images and media. This is important for people who may be blind if they're listening to the website. Having a description, having a description of an image or a description of the media that's being played can help them to be able to access things a lot easier. And using labels and markup language to structure your code. So this helps somebody who may, struggle with their sight, in the sense that they can hear which areas of the website are, the article, the main body, which area is the bit to interact with, and just keeping that structure throughout your code, throughout your website on the different pages. And I've included a link to a resource, w3.org /WAI. It just goes through how to make your websites more accessible, and it applies to Web3 as well as it does to Web2. Okay, so if there's one thing I'd like you to take away from you today, it's this website called Cards for Humanity. Basically, what this website allows you to do is to look at different users, it's randomized, and their needs. And it's an interactive tool, so it's simple to use, and each card gives you a random user with 2 traits. And you can flip over the cards, it goes to a bit more detail about what their needs would be. But essentially, by using this, you can create user stories with it. You can use it when you're designing, when you're building your web apps or your Web3 application, should I say. And it just allows you to think from different perspectives. It allows you to be a bit more open-minded as well, and just hopefully create an application that is a bit more accessible than it could have been before you interacted with this website. So I think it's a very important tool. And yeah, like I said, if there's one thing that you can take away with you today, it's this website. Okay, so what can we do on a diversity front? I think offer mentorship to people from diverse backgrounds is important. Getting people from diverse backgrounds on panels, making sure they're represented essentially, so that other people, when they come into your communities, maybe they haven't got as much access to people who would be tech aware, crypto aware, and having that representation within your communities is going to help them, of course. Acknowledge that implicit and bias exists. I know this is one that people kind of shy away from sometimes because it is quite a difficult topic, but essentially I think I like to acknowledge it in myself. We've grown up in cultures, we've grown up in societies where sometimes we've had particular messages shared with us, and sometimes we internalize those things. So I think it's important that we accept that it exists, and then from that place we can move forward to then challenge it and figure out ways to not allow it to affect us or affect our cultures or affect our organizations in the same way. Importantly, accepting people from non-traditional backgrounds. Somebody might might be neurodivergent. They might just not do well within the university environment, but they might have a portfolio. They might have examples of their work. They might have done a boot camp. They might have done self-learning. And I think allowing those people to access the opportunities that exist within Web3 is very important because, that is obviously a barrier, accessibility barrier, and oftentimes a diversity barrier as well, because somebody might be poorer, they just might not have been able to pay for university, or they might have had to go straight into work. So having that opportunity for people is massive. And lastly, just encouraging different perspectives. It helps create an inclusive culture where ideas and questions are welcomed. And I think that's important. I think diversity, as much as it's about getting people from diverse backgrounds and obviously different socioeconomic backgrounds involved, getting people with different agendas involved, I think it's also important to encourage a culture where people feel heard, where people feel valued, where questions can be asked, ideas can be put forward. I think that's very important as well. So some just issues I've seen, language only addressing men or people assuming everyone is a man within Web3. Obviously, I don't want to go into too much detail on this, but when you do that, obviously you're excluding the other people that engage with Web3. Not safe for work gifts and new content being shared openly and chats or in communities. I think this is important. You don't know where someone is, you don't know their cultural background, whether they feel comfortable with that sort of information being shared, those pictures being shared. And obviously a lot of the time it's women being shared in those gifts and new content. Some women may be comfortable with that, but some women won't. So I think it's important just to think about that as well in terms of our communities. And just some language that's creeped a little bit into Web3 at the moment. People selling coins are being called a particular sort of word at the moment. And I think encouraging or challenging that sort of behavior, should I say, it is very important. People from all backgrounds sell their coins. That's crypto, unfortunately. That's investing, unfortunately. If you look into the psychology of trading, it's about people being fearful and obviously happy at certain points. And I think generally, people follow that sort of trend. So, yeah, I think it's important that we challenge that language. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with some stats lastly before I go to the thank you slide. So, gender, age, and geographical diverse teams make better decisions 85% of the time. I think that's massive benefit. 70% more likely to capture a new market. Obviously, we're in crypto, which is, I would like to think, is being seen as a new market, or even if there's new markets within this market, obviously having a more diverse team is going to benefit you massively. 35% more likely to outperform competition, which is obviously massive as well. On the accessibility front, the world's population have 15% of the world's population have some sort of disability. Obviously, that's quite a lot, and I think making sure that we're accessible is allowing those people to obviously have access or have more access to what we're doing. 86% of websites fail to be accessible because of low contrast. This is massive. It's a very simple thing that can be done. on websites, on Web3 applications to make it accessible. So I think this is something that's very important. And lastly, companies without accessible sites lose 6.9 billion to competitors that do have accessible sites. So what I would say is, like, I was doing the reading on this, and people who go to an accessible site, they will generally come back because they know that they're catered to within that site. So by thinking about accessibility, you're opening up your applications to, loads of people that are gonna want to come back if they feel like they're catered to in that sense. So yeah, I just think it's very important to do that. So yes, thank you for listening to me today. I talk about diversity and accessibility within Web3. My name's Kyron. If you want to be in touch with me, I'm on Twitter at Kyron. I'm currently building metaverse Web3 at the moment, and we're currently focused on collating material. So we're making lists on Twitter of educational resources, diverse NFTs, accessible projects. So check that out. And the website is linked there as well, www.metadiverse.com. So yes, thank you so much.